Hi everyone, this is our last class of this series of Botanical Art in Watercolor. Today we're going to try different things. We are going to start with this wet on wet as a way of warming up. So if you have an extra paper, and I'm using the brush number 14, so a big one, I'm just wetting the paper and then I'm just putting some color, okay? So follow what I am doing and you will have a, a plus exercise. As I said, this is just a warming up exercise, okay? And about more abstract, in a way, flowers. Basically, what we are doing is just stains, okay, wet on wet, and see the accents of color that I'm going to use, changing brushes. This is number 10 or 8, and I'm going to now use a little more concentrated pigment. Okay, so the color that I am mixing is gray and a little of blue, and while everything is still wet, I am doing this. Okay, so what I want you is with this exercise, the whole class today, is just to really to relax your hand and don't worry about any details. It's just about playing with stains and water. Okay, so uh, uh, now I'm gonna do the steam. You can do this also, by dropping some drops of pigment there, watercolor with water, and really there is not limit on what you can do. Okay, I'm gonna do another flower. But really you can just let your imagination fly with this. Okay, so it's a kind of different shape of a flower now, and I will do exactly the same thing, mixing a little of uh, yellow in the center of this stain, working on wet. Uh, and you see how the pigment go from one place to the other in a way that is different today than what we have been doing, which is a little more probably contained and prosaic. About today is about freedom, uh, moving the paper a little bit, and so you can see more. Uh, really, I'm playing. I have no plan in advance. It's just what the moment is inspiring me, and I want you to do exactly the same. Okay, no plan. You don't have to really do exactly what I am doing. Just play with wet on wet. So this is our first warming up exercise. Okay, and now we have another one that I have done, okay, with different colors. You don't have to see the whole process. This is the final part. You already saw how I have done this, and now this was okay. The paper that I told you to work with during the weekend. So you have that right now, and we are going to do exactly the same thing. Okay, so my water is a little dirty. That's why you have those colors, but anyway, you can change your water and use a water that is cleaner than what I'm using. So I am going to start with these dots of yellow, okay, which is the center of the flowers that are coming, and then more water and more color. Okay, so the way I'm approaching this time, it is with colors that are very watery, but the paper is not wet. Okay, the paper, what has the paper has already this texture made of a glue that is very dry at this point. I have done these textures last week when I send you the pictures. Okay, and you really can do what you want. Okay, so what we have here is very watery colors. Okay, but again, the paper is wet. What we have is this texture. Okay, that is giving us, this effect. Huh? And as I told you last week, also you can do exactly the same thing. Tomorrow when this is all dry, you can rework and finish some parts that today are going to be too wet to work on the top of. So tomorrow everything is going to be dry, and you can do these other layers on the top of what you have. Everything is going to be dry enough, and so you are not going to clean or rinse the color that you have. Uh, just be free, uh, and as you can see, I really don't have a plan. Once I start, is what inspired me. In this case, this texture that I have done has a rhythm, and I am trying to follow that. Okay, changing from one brush to the other for some of the parts that are bigger, a bigger brush from some other small one, and changing, mixing the color now for some green with some brown. You can also add some red and some ochre color if you want. So you have this kind of green that we have already used in classes before, and while everything is still dry, uh, and the colors are very watery, okay, you just work following some of this texture that you have, uh, and you see how the, the the watercolor, which is very watery, goes in a way that is very very interesting. Okay, and that's why I also tell you, tomorrow when the flowers are dry, you can go on the top of the flowers, trying probably to accent some of this texture, or seeing the way of using all these textures. Uh, um, so we have a kind of volume, okay, with this uh, lines. And now that you see, what the texture can bring you, you can play more with that, changing brushes from one to another one, from a small one to a big one, from colors that are very watery to colors that are a little more dry. How the texture is going to change the whole perception of the paper, and the even the colors and the movement and everything. So more than for you, okay, to learn how to paint flowers or not, what this last class is trying to give you is just some advice for new experimental techniques that you can use. You see, I'm putting some accents of color. I did in a little different way, slightly different way in the other watercolor. Um, uh, but one that is um, I'm repeating is the use of a lot of water, and how I am putting some accents of color while the flower or the area of that I'm working in is still wet. Okay, so the colors or try to um, they have this tendency of melting one with the other. You have to be very careful with that. eh? I'm using right now some of the texture that is in the paper. And you can really do what you want. There is not, a logic on that. Um, I think that was enough for this. So we are going to let it dry and rest. So now we have this other um, texture work, and we are going to work on this one as a warming up exercise to work later on the one that has the texture. Okay, so the same way that we did work on these two before we went to the one that has texture, we are going to do exactly the same thing. We are going to play in with a composition, with a design that is going to be more or less close to what we have. So again, we are going to use a lot of water and our brush, the big one. In this case, the number 14, working with these stains. Huh? So water first, and we wet this area so where the flowers are going to be, and then we are going to do the colors on the top. We are going to start with the center, with a yellow one, and then going around. The paper is still wet. That's why the colors are, going the way they are going. We change our brush for something a little smaller, and we start putting these accents of color. Okay, so another kind of red is ulcerating red. We were using yellow and permanent red. Now, okay, we are putting these accents. The paper is still wet. You can add, if you want, you can add some more water on the top. So that's what I am doing right now. So adding some drops of water. We keep working, putting some accents of colors while it's still wet. Okay, we keep doing that. The other thing that I wanted to tell you is the way we use the brush. I mean, the angle that we are working with. Okay, so you can see that sometimes I move the angle of the brush, but also you can dry part of what you have done before. So you see what I'm doing. So okay, also if you think that it is too much color here or there, you can create with just with the paper. Okay, soaking up some of the water, you can create more texture. So see what I'm doing. The center, okay, of the flower, I'm just creating that just by taking out some of the color that I just put with that napkin, with the paper. Mixing some green with brown and creating some of the leaves here and there. Just be careful as the flowers, okay, are still wet, very wet. Okay, I'm not touching with the green. I'm not touching the flowers, because if not, what is going to happen is that everything is going to melt, and we don't want that. Once the flowers are dry, if you have a hair dryer, you can do that. You can really go, okay, and try to touch the green with the flowers, not before. I mean, you can experiment if you want, do whatever you want, really. Some accent of color here and there. And what I'm doing right now is just playing with some lines here and there, as this is a first approach to the next one that we are going to do with the paper that has already some texture made with the glue. Okay, so we could potentially work for hours creating lines, more dots, more stains of color, more watery, and etc. etc. But at some point we have to stop. So now we are going to go and trying to give a touch of um, limits to this one, and I'm gonna teach you how to create some kind of frame without a frame. We haven't used tape so far this time, okay? So we are going to use tape for this one and the other one. But how are we going to do when the painting, okay, the watercolor is still there? Okay, so just we insinuate two corners. So one of the corners is going to be there, and the other corner is going to be down the paper, probably in the right corner. So we are going to have another little piece of tape here, okay, and there, and we do exactly the same, probably with a different kind of color, or maybe we use just the same blue. We take the paper, the tape out, okay. We can rinse that with water while it's still wet, dissolve the paper, dissolve the color, and then dry, and we take out the tape, and here we have. Okay, so now we are going to go to the one that has the texture. This one we are going to frame, okay, with tape since the beginning. Okay, so you already have knowledge of how to do that, at the end. Now we are going to start, since the beginning. We are going to frame this artwork. And we will do exactly what we have done in the other one. So we work with water first. We have our paper in hand. And we are going to try to go with these flowers to the other paper, but the result is going to be a little different as we have texture here. Okay, I'm not working on wet on wet. I'm just working on very wet on dry. The very wet is the watercolor. On dry, okay, which is the paper. The paper is dry, and you see the difference. How the texture, that we have already pop up when the colors are of the watercolor is there. So that's a kind of very interesting effect. Mixing some ulcering green with some blue, creating some other kind of flowers, smaller, okay, than this other one, the red ones. But really, I mean, the color of the flowers and the size of the flowers and the shape of the flowers is really up to you. I'm just doing this demonstration so you can have something to take, but I will like you to develop your own kind of flowers. And And my flowers are some kind of concrete in a way, but you can do more abstract that way what I'm doing. Another little flower there. Okay. My brush is full of water, huh? And now I fold the paper again, trying to have an arrow, and I soak some of the water. Now I'm using some of the green, mixing with red, and mixing with ochre. And I am going to go on the top of all these lines that we have created by the texture of the glue. Just I'm playing, as I have repeated many times. I don't have a really a plan. This is more about what happening to your brain when you are in front of the paper with this texture, discovering some of these shapes, some of the forms that probably are going to uh, insinuate you some forms. Gonna let it dry 10 minutes or 15 minutes after. This is a little drier, and we keep working on this. You can dry the paper with your hair dryer. So we are going to go with more green. So this time I'm using another green, a green that is a little lighter, and always we mix some ochre and red, and we go with these lines on even on the top of some of the petals of the flowers, because the flower is already dry. And you can use any color, huh? You don't have to go with reds for the flowers and green for the uh, leaves. It's totally um, up to you. I say that again. What I'm doing right now is I am playing with that texture. So based on what I have already with the glue, I'm just following those lines with color now. So now I think I'm gonna work on a little of the background, and so using, we're going to do what we have done in the last paper, okay, creating this kind of background. So I'm sure that the baby is still there, and this is what we are going to do. See that what I'm using is very diluted color, and I'm gonna use also the paper in a moment, so to dry a little bit of this. Now with the paper, I'm drying out some of this excess of color. Just playing with some lines. Now we go to the upper part of our background, fill in some things and drying some other parts with our paper. So that way not all the lines that we have done are so strong. Okay, some are strong, some not. And finally we go on that upper part. I decided I was going to use yellow. Okay, my green was still, and you see what happened, my green was still too wet. So I have to fix that situation fast. And in this other part, I decided that was going to be blue. And now with changing the brush and probably going into some details here and there, probably tomorrow, and taking the tape out, okay, and continuing with this part of that texture. I think it's a nice detail, and you have our last work. Okay, so let it dry. You can rinse and dry some of the accidents that we had, and now we have many pieces, okay, for this class. So we have the warming up and the piece with the texture. We have this other two, wet on wet, and we had the other piece that we have done also with texture. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this class.